everyone, and welcome to a deep dive that just might change how you think about thinking itself.
That's a good one.
We're going to be tackling Byung Chul Han's The Burnout Society.
Okay.
Specifically, we're looking at the 2020 Italian edition.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's got some extra stuff in there, and by the time we're done with this deep dive, you're going to see those everyday pressures,
Right.
the gotta-do-it-all feeling
Yeah.
in a whole new light, and it might be a little unsettling,
A
but
little bit, yeah.
it's definitely illuminating, so buckle up. We're going deep on how society itself might be making us sick.
Yeah, Han's ideas are like a flashlight in these dark corners of our always-on culture.
Exactly.
It's not always comfortable to look at, but it's definitely illuminating, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. So let's kind of start unpacking this a little bit.
Okay.
Han talks about a shift from what the philosopher Michel Foucault called the disciplinary society to today's performance-driven society.
Right.
Now, you might be familiar with Foucault's work. He was all about how power operates, in these subtle ways.
Absolutely.
But what does this shift actually mean for us day to day?
Well, I think a good way to think about it is to first imagine Foucault's world,
Yeah.
hospitals, prisons, factories,
Okay.
places with really strict rules.
Huh?
This clear sense of like, you cannot do this. You cannot do that, just hanging in the air.
Right, like a very restrictive.
Very restricted.
Yeah.
Kind of place.
Totally. And all about keeping people in line.
So it was all about no.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, basically.
But now it feels like it's the opposite, right? Everywhere you turn, it's yes, we can. Gotta hustle,
Yes.
gotta optimize, even on vacation, it seems like.
Now it's like fitness centers, offices, airports, all these places that are pushing us to constantly strive and achieve, be our best selves.
Yeah.
But Han's argument is that this constant pressure to perform is what leads to anxiety and depression and that dreaded burnout.
Right.
He even calls it a psychic infarction.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like a heart attack, but for your mind.
So it's not just that we're stressed, it's like the system itself is making us ill. That's the core of his argument.
Yeah. Yeah, and it gets even more interesting because he says that the very nature of our illnesses is different now.
Okay.
He says 21st century illnesses are neuronal, not viral. So back in the 20th century, it was all about immunity, right? Fighting off the bad stuff the other.
Yeah, like we were in a constant state of defense.
Always on guard. Yeah, exactly.
But now.
Now Han says we're drowning in positivity.
Okay.
Too much achievement, too much connection, just too much of everything.
Interesting.
It's not an outside attack, it's an overload from within.
So instead of dying from a virus, we're dying from excess.
Yeah, pretty much like that philosopher Baudrillard said, we're dying from sameness.
Right.
The pressure to conform to this one very narrow idea of success.
So this is where Han's idea of the depleted self comes in.
Exactly.
And he's actually pushing back against another thinker, Elaine Ehrenberg, who said that depression was all about struggling to be unique, to stand out.
But Han says no, it's about this relentless pressure to achieve the fear of failing and just the self-exploitation that comes with all of that.
Yeah, constantly pushing ourselves to the limit.
So it's like we're at war with ourselves, pushing harder and harder until we break.
And we're doing it all while surrounded by comfort and convenience.
Yeah, which makes it even weirder.
Totally bizarre.
Ah, right.
Right. It's like we're these well-fed prisoners, in these comfortable cells.
Yeah.
Han even compares the modern worker to a musulman.
Oh, wow.
Which was a term for those in concentration camps who were so depleted they were barely even human.
Yeah.
So we may have it easier materially, but the depletion is very real.
Okay, I'm feeling a little depleted just thinking about this.
I know, me too.
But I'm curious, if we're so busy achieving, how does that impact our ability to, actually think?
Well, this is where Han gets into attention deficit and the loss of contemplation.
Okay.
He says that we've shifted from deep, focused attention to what he calls hyperattention.
Hyperattention.
Yeah, fragmented, constantly shifting focus,
So I can have 5 browser tabs, open a podcast going, and a text conversation all at the same time.
Exactly.
But am I really absorbing any of it? I don't know.
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
And Han would argue that this inability to tolerate boredom, this constant need for stimulation, actually blocks us from deep thinking and creativity. He talks about the loss of deep boredom, which sounds kind of crazy.
It does sound a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, but he sees it as essential for new ideas to emerge.
Interesting.
He even references Walter Benjamin's metaphor of the enchanted bird,
Okay.
which represents that quiet, contemplative state where our minds can wander and magic can happen.
But instead, we're like those birds constantly flitting from branch to branch, never settling, always on edge,
That's a great way to put it. Yeah,
always looking for the next dopamine hit.
exactly.
Yeah,
And it is kind of ironic, isn't it?
it is.
We think we're so advanced, but we're losing this uniquely human ability for deep, focused thought.
Yeah, and as Han argues in the later part of the book, this loss feeds directly into the burnout society and the rise of a new kind of vulnerable individual, the Homo saxer. Okay, wait, Homo saxer. That sounds intense before we get there. I think we need to pause and let all of this sink in for a minute.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to take in, but understanding these underlying shifts from discipline to performance, from viral to neuronal, it's key to grasping how we got to this point.
Definitely, we'll be back in a bit to tackle that Homo sacer and what it all means for us in this burnout society.
Sounds good.
So grab a glass of water, maybe do some deep breathing. We'll see you soon.
See you then.
Welcome back. I don't know about you, but all this talk about psychic infarctions and depleted selves,
Yeah,
it's
heavy stuff.
it's making me really want a nap, like a long vacation.
I hear that.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But remember, Han isn't just diagnosing the problem.
Okay.
He also hints at some possible ways out of this burnout trap.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, good, because I was starting to get a little worried there.
Yeah.
But I guess my first question is, where do we even begin?
Right.
How do we reclaim that solemn time, that
Yeah.
space for play and connection in a world that's just constantly screaming at us to produce, produce, produce?
That is the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
There's no magic bullet.
Right.
But one thing Han suggests is that we need to rediscover the power of not doing.
Okay. Right.
It's like actually resisting that urge to fill every moment with some kind of activity.
He calls it active passivity,
Yeah.
which sounds like a total contradiction.
It does, right?
How can you be both active and passive at the same time?
Well, it's a bit of a brain twister, but think about it. Even our leisure time is often like scheduled and optimized these days.
Right.
So we're constantly striving even when we're supposed to be relaxing.
Yeah.
So active passivity is about letting go of that,
Right.
striving, allowing ourselves to just be
Mm.
without any agenda or goal.
So it's like intentionally embracing boredom, which honestly sounds terrifying
It can be, for sure.
in our always-on world.
Yeah, we're so conditioned to think that any moment not spent working or achieving is a wasted moment.
Right.
But what if those wasted moments are actually the key to unlocking our creativity,
Okay.
our well-being, our very humanity?
Interesting.
Yeah.
This reminds me of Han's discussion of vita activa versus vita contemplativa,
Yes.
the active life versus the contemplative life.
Exactly.
He seems to be saying that we need more of the latter,
Yeah,
more space for reflection and just being.
exactly. And it's not about becoming a hermit or checking out of society
Uh-huh.
completely,
Right.
but it's about creating space for those essential human experiences that get stifled in a culture that's just obsessed with doing.
Mm. Mm.
Wonder, curiosity, true creativity.
He even suggests that contemplation can be a form of resistance.
Yeah.
So by simply choosing to not do, we're actually pushing back against the whole system.
Like a quiet rebellion, but a powerful one.
I like the sound of that.
By resisting that pressure to constantly produce and consume, we're challenging the very foundation of the burnout society.
Right.
We're saying that our worth isn't solely determined by what we achieve or how much we buy.
Okay. I'm on board with the idea in theory,
Yeah.
but practically speaking, how do we actually cultivate this active passivity in our daily lives?
Right.
I mean, we all have deadlines, responsibilities,
Yeah.
to-do lists a mile long.
Yeah,
It's easy to say just be, but how do we actually make it happen?
I totally get it. It's not easy to just switch gears like that, but even small changes can make a big difference.
Okay.
Start by carving out just a few minutes each day for intentional non-doing.
Okay.
Put the phone down, close the laptop, and just sit quietly. Notice your breath, the sensations in your body, the sounds around you.
Just be present,
Yeah, exactly.
which sounds so simple yet so difficult.
It is. But the more you practice, the easier it becomes. And once you start to get comfortable with that stillness,
Right.
you can explore other practices that cultivate contemplation, like meditation, mindful walking, spending time in nature.
Yeah.
Find what works for you and make it a regular part of your routine.
This connects back to Hankey's idea of fundamental fatigue,
Yes.
which we touched on earlier.
Right.
It's not about collapsing from exhaustion.
Yeah.
It's about finding that deeper, more connected kind of fatigue
You
that
know.
opens us up to the world around us.
It's about surrendering to the natural rhythms of life, allowing ourselves to slow down, to truly see and experience the world without constantly trying to change it or control it.
And this brings us back to Han's discussion of the loss of ritual and festivity.
Right.
He argues that these shared experiences, these moments of collective joy and connection, are so essential for our well-being.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that we're really missing in our modern world, wouldn't you say?
absolutely. He contrasts the modern day festival, which is often just a commercialized spectacle,
Yeah.
with the ancient concept of the festival as a sacred time, a time to step outside of everyday life and connect with something larger than ourselves. And I think there's a real longing for that kind of experience, that
Yeah.
sense of belonging and shared purpose.
So how do we bring that sense of sacredness back into our lives?
Right.
I mean, we can't exactly recreate ancient rituals in our modern world, can we?
True, but we can find ways to create our own rituals. You
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
our own moments of shared meaning and connection.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be anything elaborate.
Right.
It could be as simple as having a weekly family dinner where everyone puts away their phones and focuses on being present with one another,
Mm.
or gathering with friends for a potluck,
Hmm.
sharing food stories, laughter.
It's about intentionally creating those spaces where we can truly connect,
Exactly.
where we can experience that sense of belonging and community
Yeah.
that's so often missing in our fragmented individualistic society.
Yeah, it's a powerful antidote to the isolation and the depletion of the burnout society.
It's about reclaiming our humanity in a way, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. It's about remembering that we're not just cogs in a machine,
Right.
not just data points or consumers.
Yeah.
We're complex, multifaceted beings with a deep need for connection, for
Mhm.
meaning, for beauty. And those needs can't be met through constant work and striving.
Right.
We need to create space for rest, for reflection, for joy.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
And I'm curious, what are some of the things that have stood out to you so far? What resonates with you?
Mhm.
What challenges your assumptions? Take a moment to reflect on these questions as we prepare to dive into the final part of our exploration of the burnout society.
Yes.
We'll be back soon.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the burnout society. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
We've explored some pretty heavy concepts, from the pressure to perform to the
Yeah.
very nature of our modern-day illnesses.
Yeah.
But while Han's analysis can feel a bit bleak at times,
Yeah,
he does offer glimmers of hope.
he does.
Remember those pathways out of the burnout society we talked about?
Yeah. Those ways to reclaim our time, our energy, our very selves.
Absolutely.
Well, one of those pathways, and perhaps the most intriguing one, is through beauty.
Interesting.
Han actually sees beauty as a powerful force for disruption, a way to push back against the monotony and emptiness of our, hyperproductive world.
Okay.
He even goes so far as to say that beauty can be a form of resistance.
Wow, that's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, we usually think of beauty as something superficial,
Right?
something pleasant, but ultimately unimportant.
Yeah. It's not a typical rallying cry.
Right.
But Han argues that by cultivating a sense of beauty in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
by surrounding ourselves with things that uplift and inspire us,
Mm-hmm.
we're actually challenging the dominant values of the burnout society.
Yeah.
We're saying that there's more to life than just working and consuming.
So it's not just about aesthetics.
Right.
It's about finding those things that truly nourish our souls. Those experiences that remind us that there's beauty and meaning to be found, even in the midst of all the chaos.
Exactly. And that might look different for each of us.
Right.
For some, it might be spending time in nature,
Yeah.
really immersing themselves in the awe-inspiring beauty of the natural world.
For others, it might be engaging with art.
Yes.
Whether it's music, painting, poetry, anything that speaks to something deep within them.
Absolutely.
It might even be about creating something beautiful ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like tending a garden, preparing a meal, writing a poem. Anything that brings us joy and allows us to express our own unique creativity.
Exactly. It's about finding those things that spark joy,
Yeah.
that evoke a sense of wonder, that remind us of the beauty and the mystery of life itself.
Mhm.
And in those moments, we can begin to step outside of that burnout society, to reconnect with our own humanity, and to rediscover those essential things.
Yeah.
Our capacity for joy, connection, and meaning.
It's funny. We started this conversation talking about psychic infarctions and the depletion of the self.
Right.
And now we're ending it talking about beauty and joy. Yeah. It's like Han is taking us on this journey from darkness into light.
It is a journey, isn't it?
It is.
And I think it's a journey we all need to take in some way, because if we can learn to cultivate beauty in our own lives, maybe, just maybe, we can start to create a more beautiful world. A world that's less driven by consumption and competition.
Yeah.
And more focused on human flourishing.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to pose a question to you, dear listener.
Okay.
What does this all mean for you? How might you incorporate these insights from the burnout society into your own life?
Yeah. What brings you joy? Where do you find beauty?
And once you've identified those sources of joy and beauty, how can you make space for them in your life? How can you prioritize those things that nourish your soul, even if it means saying no to other demands?
Yeah.
Remember, you deserve to experience joy. You deserve to experience beauty. And in reclaiming those essential parts of yourself, you're not just taking care of yourself. You're contributing to a world that's more humane, more beautiful.
It's a ripple effect.
It is.
And it starts with each of us.
This has been such a rich and thought-provoking conversation, and I want to thank you, dear listener, for joining us on this deep dive into the burnout society.
Yes, thank you.
I hope it sparked some new insights and maybe even inspired you to make some changes in your own life.
Absolutely.
Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep seeking out those moments of beauty and connection that make life worth living.
Yes, beautiful.